Hello, readers. So today, before we get started with our lesson, will you share with your partner for a few minutes about the reading and writing that you did for homework? Will you take a minute or two to give your partner a tour of that writing? So show your partner what you jotted and explain why you chose to jot that particular information. And my online learners, you can just take a minute. If you have someone at home to share with, that'd be great. If you are able, I just thought of this recently, if you're able to maybe do a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting with another classmate or someone who you can share your reading with, that'd be great as well. Okay, readers, so I'd like to gather you back now. So some of you might be doing some of the same things I find myself doing at times when I read. I might be, if I'm sort of rushed or I don't love the book, or sometimes it's that I love the book and I don't want to pause and think, or, meaning you're recording what you're thinking in the moment, jotting down whatever's in your head. That type of writing about reading just doesn't help you to think more deeply about your reading. Your book deserves better thinking. Your partner does as well, and so do you. So today I want to teach you that the strongest writing about reading actually lifts the level of your thinking about the book. Whenever you pause in your reading to do some writing, it helps to think about how you want to capture not your first thinking, but your best thinking. So can I share some tips with you that will help you really take your writing about reading from good to great, so that your writing about reading helps you to think more deeply about your reading? So what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to listen closely, because in a few minutes, you'll study your own writing about reading to decide which things you're already doing and which should be your goals. So I want to show you this chart. Okay, so here are some tips for taking your writing about reading from good to great. And I'll be sharing a copy of this with all of you as well, in-class learners and my online students. So our goal is to move from jotting the first thinking that comes to mind and instead capture our best thinking. So these are a few tips to how you can do that without it taking forever. So the first tip: the time you spend reading matters above all. Your writing about reading should just take up a small percentage of your time. It's only about 10% of your time. Researchers at Columbia University say you should only spend 10% of your reading time writing. Prioritize quality over quantity. So in other words, make it more about how well you're doing it rather than how long you are doing that. And that means you'll want to only jot your most interesting thinking. Okay, so tip number 2, don't jot the things you can remember. If you can remember how all the characters are connected, don't jot that down. You want to only jot things that you can't hold in your head, like ideas that you're investigating. So I hope that you're already thinking about which of these you do as a writer about reading. Okay, so here's another tip. Don't start jotting too quickly or automatically. Don't record your first thoughts. Record your most interesting thoughts. So that means before you jot down your first thought, think to yourself, so what? Or what this makes me think is, and then push yourself to even richer, deeper thinking. So for the last tip, decide what kind of writing best suits your thinking. If you own the book, annotate in it, marking up lines and jotting thoughts as you go. Now, if you don't own the book, you can jot a quick post-it, which I've been passing those out. And for my online learners, you have those digital notebooks. So to trace an idea over time, create a sketch. You can create a timeline or a chart or combine post-its with any of those. When you get an idea that needs to grow, one you need to think more about, you might write long in your notebook. I'd like you to pull out your writing about reading and study it with these tips in mind. Ask yourself, what have you already done to lift the level of your writing about reading? And once you know what tips you've already tried, think about which tips should be goals for you as you write about your reading over the next few days. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that now, to study your writing. Okay, so as you studied, maybe you realized a few things. Perhaps you realized you've been writing everything, all of your first thoughts, all the things you can hold in your head, and you need to scale back on your writing about reading so it's just 10% of your reading time. Or maybe you realize you hardly ever jot, and you sometimes forget ideas that you had while you were reading. Or maybe you realized if you force yourself to pause at the end of each chapter, you might find you have something that's worth jotting. So those are some ideas that hopefully you were thinking about and that you can use going forward. So I want you to remember that whenever you sit down to read, whenever you stop to jot, you can make the decision to do particularly strong writing about reading, to write in ways that actually lift the level of your thinking. You've set some powerful goals that will help you take your writing from good to great. So as you go off to read and write today, I'd like you to especially keep in mind that first tip. Your writing about reading should just take up 10% of your reading time. So that means that most of the thinking work you do about your characters today will be in your head, and your best thinking will make it into your notebook. Readers, another really important purpose of writing about your reading is to hold on to ideas that you want to share with a partner or a group. So today and going forward, as you read, I'd like you to be thinking about the fact that your writing is a way to prepare for having better conversations with your reading partner. For my in-class students, before we leave today, I'd like you to make a quick display of your writing about reading, and if you would, put it on your desk. Open up your notebook, lay out your Post-it notes or flat pages where you did some purposeful annotating. So once you have your gallery exhibits set up, what I'd like you to do is move from desk to desk and study your classmates' writing about their reading. As we do this, I want you to think about what your classmates did to take their writing from good to great. And jot what you're noticing on Post-it notes that I'll be passing out so you can try some of those same things the next time you write about your reading. And for my online students, if you can, maybe have someone at home look at your writing and give you some tips on how you can take your writing from good to great. So for your homework tonight, I'm going to be sending you home with many copies of these two charts to think deeply about characters and tips for taking your writing about reading from good to great. Tonight, I'd like you to try to read for at least 40 minutes. Try to push yourself. And that means you should be reading at least 30 pages. And as you read tonight, you'll want to be doing rich character work in your mind, determining which traits are most dominant, rethinking a character's traits as you read on, and also considering your character's less likable side. So all those things that we've talked about so far. And when you do pause to jot for about 4 to 5 minutes, make the most of it with that deep thinking. I want you to work on the goals that you set in class today and use some of the work that you saw in your classmates' notebooks today in the gallery walk and apply that to your own work tonight. Now, off you go.